What's up guys, today we're gonna be doing some exam style questions. एक तो हम लोगों ने यहाँ एक leaf structure के जो test yourself questions है वो भी छोड़ दिए थे because the video got long in itself. But today I'm gonna be doing this portion and I'm gonna be doing the, let me just put down here, the exam style questions of the whole chapter. ज़्यादा नहीं है, it's not gonna be a long video, but this is gonna help you revise your concepts. And you know, at the end of the day, one thing I will always recommend, one way to revise and to see कि आपके कितने कॉन्सेप्ट्स क्लियर हैं, कितनी चीज़ें आपको याद हैं, इज़ बाय डूइंग क्वेश्चंस. जितना भी आप चीज़ रिवाइज करते जाओ, यू विल स्टिल नॉट बी एबल टू रिमेंबर इट एज वेल एज अनटिल अगर आप वो सवाल खुद करो, राइट? दैट्स समथिंग आई वुड से. ऑलराइट, नाउ लेट्स गेट इनटू इट. क्वेश्चन नंबर 7A. Figure 6.23, as you can see over here, is a section through the photosynthesizing leaf. On the diagram, label a palisade cell, a spongy cell, a mesophyll cell, and a lower epidermis. So three things we have to label: palisade, spongy cell, and a lower epidermis cells. Not too difficult, as I will label everything over here so we can have a quick revision. First and foremost, we know that this over here is the upper side and this over here is the lower side of our cell, right? Just like that. What I want you to know over here is that the top layer, as you can see over here, this is called the cuticle, which was the waxy layer, right? Right underneath the cuticle was the upper epidermis. Now when we come just a bit below the upper epidermis, we get these long structures, long rectangular structures, cells which contain chloroplast. As you can see, all these black structures that they shown here, of course it's green in color, which are the chloroplasts, but these cells are the palisade mesophyll cells, right? And how did I identify it? Number one, it's long, rectangular. Number two, it has a lot of chloroplast, as we can see. And number three, it's on the upper portion of the cell, or you could say not upper portion of the cell, upper portion of the diagram or of the section. Now right below, when you come, of course you see more of palisade mesophyll cells, but once we come on the lower half of this section, you see over here, these are spongy, irregular shaped cells which have comparatively very much lesser amount of chloroplast compared to the palisade. We have much less amount of chloroplast. So of course these are the spongy mesophyll cells, right? These are the spongy mesophyll cells. One more thing that we can identify here is between the spongy mesophyll cells there are air gaps, as you can see, right? Air spaces. Can we see any air spaces between the palisade? No, there's barely any air spaces here. They're very close and packed together compared to the spongy mesophyll cell. So we have labeled the palisade, the spongy, and of course, as there was an upper epidermis over here, right over here, these are the lower epidermis cells over here, right? One more point that you should notice here, right next to the lower epidermis, we see over here are the guard cells. And how do I know that they're the guard cells? Because as you can see, there are chloroplasts present. These are the chloroplasts, and then there's an opening over here, which is the stomata. So I have almost labeled everything in this diagram, and over here on the right side, this is the vascular bundle containing the xylem and the phloem. So not too difficult. I just wanted a whole good revision of this diagram. All right. B, complete the table. State which of the cells would photosynthesize most rapidly, least rapidly, and not at all. Explain your answers. So they want us to tell which one of these cells synthesizes the most rapidly, least rapidly, and not at all. Now, very simple. You know what's the logic, what's the concept? Just look at which cells have the most amount of chloroplast present, which means they will be photosynthesizing the most, and see which ones have the least or which have none. As you can see, palisade mesophyll cells have the most amount of chloroplast present. Spongy mesophyll cells, on the other hand, have comparatively much lower in number, and the lower epidermis, as you can see here, have zero chloroplast present. What does that mean? They don't photosynthesize at all. They have zero. So nothing difficult. Most rapidly is gonna be our palisade mesophyll cell, right? Most rapidly. The spongy mesophyll cell is going to be the least rapidly, and the one that does not at all is going to be our lower epidermis. And the reason is as simple. This has the most chloroplast, least chloroplast, and no chloroplast, right? Simple dimple. Okay. Question number 8 is state the source of energy for photosynthesizing plant. For a photosynthesizing plant, basically the source of energy. Well, source of energy comes from glucose. Like at the end, as we remember, let me just. This is the equation for photosynthesis, right? Here we have carbon dioxide plus water gives us C6H12O6, which is basically glucose plus oxygen, right? Now the compound which is used to provide energy for the plant is basically glucose. So the answer is going to be glucose. They have asked state the source of energy for photosynthesizing plant. That source of energy is glucose via the process of photosynthesis. State the chemical process that provides a plant with energy to carry on all the other living activities. So later, this glucose goes through the process of respiration, which gives us energy. This energy is used for all the functions of the plant, all the functions, all the what's it called, yeah, all the living activities. So the chemical process here is respiration. You would want to think the chemical process might be photosynthesis, but photosynthesis provides the source of energy. It does not provide energy. Two different things. See, they're gonna catch you off guard here. Question number 8 is asks for the source of energy, that is glucose. Now they're asking which process gives us the energy. The process which gives us the energy is respiration. That's what gives us the energy. Last question is question number 9. Look at figure 6.22. Explain why photosynthesis does not take place in the cells of the upper epidermis. Let's just go to the image here, and as you can see 6.22, and they're asking upper epidermis. So as you can see here, this is the upper epidermis because this is the upper side of the diagram, and over here we have the lower epidermis. So we're asking why do these cells not photosynthesize? Simple. As you can see, these palisade cells have these chloroplasts present, all these green organelles which have the chlorophyll. Can you see any chloroplast in these upper epidermis cells? Not at all. So are they going to photosynthesize? Nope. So that's the answer. Since there are no chloroplast, that's going to be the answer. Since that there are no chloroplasts present in the upper epidermis cells, the upper epidermis cells will not photosynthesize. Simple as it is. Now let's get into the exam style questions. All right. This is basically generalized questions for all the topics of the plants chapter, which consists of the photosynthesis, the leaf structure, and the mineral nutrition, right? So let's get into it. Question number 1. A molecule of carbon dioxide enters the leaf at 4 p.m., basically afternoon time, and leaves the cell at 6 p.m., evening time, basically when the sun sets, right? Sunset. Describe what could have happened to the carbon dioxide molecule during the 2 hours it was in the leaf. Well, it's pretty simple. The carbon dioxide, where's the diagram? Over here. The carbon dioxide would have entered the leaf through the stomata. As you can see, the stomata is the opening. It would have gone into the air spaces over here, then it would have traveled into the spongy mesophyll cells, or it could have traveled into the palisade mesophyll cells. For the what? For the process of photosynthesis, right? So it's going to be used up. Now, they're asking at the time of 6 p.m. what could have happened. Of course, now it's the sun is setting, so photosynthesis is not gonna be taking place. What's gonna be taking place more comparatively? Respiration. And what product do we get from respiration? We get carbon dioxide plus water, right? So we're going to be getting carbon dioxide in higher amount at the time of sunset because there is no sunlight, so no photosynthesis. So more carbon dioxide is going to be produced from these cells, and hence now these let's suppose carbon dioxide is going to be produced. This carbon dioxide is going to move into the air spaces between the spongy mesophyll cells. It's going to move then in through the stomatal opening into the environment. That's basically what's going to happen in these 2 hours. Pretty simple. They just wanted you to explain what's going to happen at the time when the sun is present and at the time of sunset. That's just what you need to know. Question number 2. Complete the table to identify which gases you would expect a leaf to be taking in and giving out in bright sunlight and in darkness. Pretty simple, same concept which we just applied in question number 1. Same question we're going to apply here. Bright sunlight में क्या हो रहा होगा? You need to keep one thing in mind. Respiration takes place all the time, whether it be morning, whether it be darkness, doesn't matter. Photosynthesis, on the other hand, takes place when there's sunlight, because we need sunlight for photosynthesis, right? So we need to know that during sunlight there is going to be more carbon dioxide taken in, and more oxygen taken out, right? Whereas in darkness there's going to be less carbon dioxide taken in. However, there's going to be like comparatively, sorry, there's going to be more oxygen taken in over here as well. Given, wait, let me just, it's getting a bit confusing. Let me just fix this up. All right, so you know what, let's just get to the table. Let's not make it too confusing. See, the light conditions, in bright conditions, gas is taken in by the plant. Of course, photosynthesis is going to be taking place in sunlight. So what's going to be taken in for photosynthesis? Carbon dioxide is going to be taken in. And what's going to be given out? What's going to be the product of photosynthesis? Oxygen is going to be the product of photosynthesis, right? In darkness, however, respiration takes place in higher amounts, right? So what is taken in for respiration? Oxygen is taken in for respiration. And what is the product of respiration? What is given out at the end of respiration? I think we made it up here as well. Look, this is the product. Carbon dioxide is the product of respiration. So carbon dioxide is given out. Pretty simple. Sorry, I confused you up there, but yeah, that's basically it. Now, question number 3. Measurements on a leaf show that it is given out carbon dioxide and taking in oxygen, right? It's taking in oxygen for what? Respiration, and it's giving out carbon dioxide, which is a product of respiration. Does this prove that photosynthesis is not going on in the leaf? Explain your answer. No, this does not prove that photosynthesis is not taking place. Why? Because respiration is always taking place. As I said earlier on, respiration is always taking place, because all our cells always need to respire, always need to produce energy to carry out their living functions. However, photosynthesis, on the other hand, only takes place when it's daylight. So what we need to see is not the fact that oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is given out. What we need to see is how much carbon dioxide is taken in for photosynthesis and how much oxygen is given out. Because if more carbon dioxide is taken in, it means that photosynthesis is taking place, right? So that's one way we can see. Of course, all the time, this process where carbon dioxide is given out and oxygen is taken in, this is always taking place because of respiration. But we need to see the other thing, how much carbon dioxide is taken into the cell and how much oxygen is given out of the cell. That proves whether photosynthesis is taking place or not. Hope that is clear. With reference to photosynthesis, state the adaptation and functions of the epidermis and the mesophils of the cells. Okay, so firstly, the mesophil of the cells, let's get to that. There's palisade mesophil and there's spongy mesophil. The palisade mesophils have, as we can see over here, palisade mesophils have many chloroplasts, which helps increase in the absorption of sunlight, which ultimately increases the photosynthetic activity of the cell, the rate of photosynthesis. The spongy mesophils, on the other hand, they provide air spaces for the gaseous exchange, for the gases to travel. So at the time of photosynthesis, the plant needs carbon dioxide to enter into the cell, right? So these air spaces helps the carbon dioxide travel into the cell. So that's what the spongy, and also of course the spongy mesophils also contain chloroplasts, but not as much in amount comparatively. The epidermis, on the other hand, or as you can see over here, the epidermis basically provides, as we remember, the epidermis, if we're talking about the upper epidermis, how it helps in photosynthesis is that it produces this upper layer called the cuticle. As we remember, the cuticle is formed from the epidermis, right? What the function of this cuticle was that it prevents water to get evaporated. It prevents water to be evaporated. And is that a good thing or bad thing for photosynthesis? It's a good thing. It's a good thing because For in photosynthesis, carbon dioxide reacts with water, and if water is in low amounts, if it's evaporated, is photosynthesis going to take place? No, it's not. We need water. So since these upper epidermis cells produce this cuticle layer which prevents water evaporation, this water is retained, or you could say is sustained in the cell, because of which photosynthesis increases. So that's one function. So that's the function of epidermis. I would say that's the main function of the epidermis cells. All right, question number 5. In some plants, the stomata close for a period at about midday. Suggest one advantage and two disadvantages of the plant. All right, so not too difficult either. Firstly, we need to consider the fact they're giving us a period of time midday. Basically, this is the time when there is sunlight present, right? We need to always consider whether they're talking about a time when there's sunlight present or it's a time of darkness. So here they're talking about sunlight, but the stomata are closed. Usually, this is probably some plants which are an exception, but usually, of course, when there's sunlight, the stomata are open, which helps carbon dioxide come inside the leaf. Now what you need to consider here is they're saying suggest one advantage and two disadvantages. At daylight, जब गर्मी हो रही होती है, of course, just like humans, they sweat. The water is evaporated from the body just like that. The plants, they also release water vapors, right? They also release water vapors for multiple functions. It could give a cooling effect to the plant as well. However, if a lot of water is evaporated from the plant, that's bad for the plant, because water is also a crucial component for the plant, for it, whether it could be photosynthesis or it could be multiple other things. So one advantage, what you could say, basically they're talking about this stomata over here. They're talking about this opening over here, the gap between the two guard cells. They're saying if this opening closes, what is the advantage? Advantage number one is that the water vapor, the H2O water vapor, it does not evaporate. It does not get evaporated like the H2O over here. It does not leave the cell, right? Which helps, which ultimately leads to, which basically does not decrease the water concentration in the cells, right? So if we were to say that these water vapors were evaporated from the cell, the leaf cell would be deficient in water, right? Which is a bad thing, which is harmful for the plant. However, if the stomata are closed, hence these water vapors do not evaporate from the stomata, from the opening, leading to the water staying inside the leaf, right? So that's an advantage. However, there are two disadvantages to the cell. Number one disadvantage is that the carbon dioxide which had to enter into the cell for photosynthesis, right, which now is not going to enter into the cell because the stomata is closed. So photosynthesis will not take place because carbon dioxide is unable to enter into the cell. Number two, the oxygen which had to leave the cell, which had to exit the cell, right, that is also unable to exit the cell. But one thing you need to know is that since the oxygen is unable to exit the cell and enter into the environment, this same oxygen which is required for the plant at the time of respiration, right, it's not just let me just clear this up over here. It's not just that the carbon dioxide enters into, right, it enters into the stomata. It's also the oxygen enters into the stomata as well, but for which purpose? For respiration. So if the oxygen is unable to enter into the cell, respiration doesn't occur either, right? If oxygen is unable to enter into the leaf through the stomata, respiration is unable to occur. If carbon dioxide is unable to enter through the stomata into the leaf, photosynthesis is unable to take place. So very crucial things, right? They're really getting into your concepts over here. All right, now question number 6a suggests how floating pond plant like duckweed can survive without having its roots on its soil. This is a more of a question which is an exception. We'll get into that in a bit. We'll do both of these questions by the end. Let's firstly get through our conceptual based questions. Question number 7: elements that are essential for the plant to grow are contained in nitrates and phosphates. They are found in fresh water, but phosphate is usually present in smaller amounts than nitrates. Nitrate is usually present in excess. However, because of the smaller amounts of phosphate in the water, it can be a limiting nutrient for the plants. All right, pretty simple. Explain why phosphate is described as a limiting nutrient for water plants. Of course, because their soils, or from where they absorb their phosphate ions and their mineral ions, there the phosphate ions is smaller in amount, of course, so it's gonna be a limiting factor. Just like we learned, if nitrate ions in certain situations are low in amount, there's stunted growth in plants. Just like that, when there's magnesium low in amount, there is yellow coloration of the plant. Just like that, of course, if phosphate ions is present in lower amount, there could be it could act as a limiting nutrient for the growth of the plant as well. Suggests the effect of a small decrease in nitrate supply of plant. Pretty simple, it's gonna stunt the growth. It's gonna stunt the growth of the plant. Not excessively stunt the growth of the plant, but to a certain extent it will stunt the growth if we decrease nitrate supply for water plants. Give a reason for your answer. Because nitrate ions help in making amino acids, which help in making proteins, and that could help in growth, right? And if there's low amount of nitrate ions, that could stunt the growth. C, state 2 factors other than mineral ions or light that can limit plant growth. We learned this before too. There's carbon dioxide, that could be a limiting factor, right? There could be water as well, that could be a limiting factor too, because these are components for photosynthesis. Yeah, so that's basically it for question number 7. And question number 8: the diagram shows a section through a leaf. Identify parts V, W, X, and Y. Describe the main features and functions of each part. All right, I think I almost went through almost everything in the previous question up here, but I guess let's just go over here, right? I think I went through everything over here, but let's just quickly just run this down. Right over here, as we can see, V is palisade mesophyll cells, right? W is the vascular bundle, which contains the xylem and phloem. X over here is spongy mesophyll cells, and is that it? VWX and Y. Where's Y? Where's Y? Over here. Sorry, I kind of created a mess. So here Y. Y is our guard cells, right? Y is our guard cells. Yeah, our guard cells. And describe their main functions. Guard cells basically open and close the stomata. The spongy mesophyll cells, they provide the air spaces. They also have chloroplasts, which help in photosynthesis. W contains xylem and phloem. Xylem transports water and minerals, whereas phloem transports sucrose and sugar molecules. Our palisade mesophyll cells contains chloroplast, which helps in photosynthesis. Yeah, that's all. Okay, that's all. And okay, so last question number 6. All right, basically something we need to know about the duckweed plant is that it's a floating pond plant. So it's not like every normal plant, which basically, if we can say, this is a plant, right? And then there's the, what can I draw over here? Let's suppose this is the soil over here. Usually plants absorb the nutrients from the soil, right? But the duckweed plant, it floats on pond water. So now they're asking, okay, how can it survive without having roots in the soil? Like, where does it get its mineral ions? How does it even survive? Because the mineral ions are very important. So basically, something very interesting about these pond plants is that since they're floating on water, the mineral ions which is present in the water, they just absorb it directly from the water. That's how they work. Since they're just floating on the water, the mineral ions present in the water, they just absorb it directly. That's it. And 6b is duckweed has stomata, basically the opening. Suggest where these would be found in the duckweed leaf. Explain your answer. All right, and so basically over here, This is also pretty logical. You know what, let me just make a diagram over here. Let's suppose this was a duckweed plant, which is probably not how it looks like, but let's just suppose that. And here it's floating on water, right? It's floating on water. Now something that you need to know is that usually the plant has its stomata, even as you can see over here, stomata on the lower side, of the leaf, right? On the underneath side of the leaf, yeah, the lower, or you could say, let me get a diagram for you so you can understand it. I don't know if they've given it here or not. Over here, look. Basically on the underneath side, or you could say the lower side of the leaf, usually that's where the openings, as you can see, are present. However, the reason why the stomata are not present on the lower side of the leaf is simply because these plants, they're floating on water, so the lower side of the leaf is in contact. As you can see, the leaf is in contact with the water, so even if the stomata were to be present on the lower side of the leaf, it would have been blocked by the water and no gas could be exchanged through that stomata. That's why nature did it in such a way that the upper side over here, the upper side of the leaf, that's where the stomata are present for the gaseous exchange. So what they asked here was, duckweed has a stomata, so they do have a stomata for the gaseous exchange, right? Suggest where these would be found in duckweed. It would be found on the upper part of the leaf, probably on the lining of the upper epidermis, right? As you can see here, this is the upper epidermis. There isn't any stomata present over here in a normal cell. And as we can see here in the lower epidermis, this is where the opening is present. But in duckweed, probably, and that's how it is, in the upper side of the leaf, next to the upper epidermal cells, that's where probably the guard cells would be present like this, with an opening between them called the stomata. That's probably how it's going to be, and that's how it is, right? Like, the reason I'm saying probably is because that's how nature would make the cell, that's how nature would make the plant function. All right, so that's it for this video. I know it was a bit jumbled up, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you liked, then like, share, subscribe. Hope all the concepts were crystal clear, and catch you guys in the